module is due Monday. Next week, it's hard to believe, but next week is the last week before spring break. So I don't have module 7 stuff, which we're going to start today, due till after spring break, like the Tuesday. I don't want to make it do the Monday after spring break. That's probably not a bad thing. So I moved it to the Tuesday. So we'll finish module 7 next week, maybe even start module 8. I'd like to move as fast as we can to try to cover everything. But module 7, you'll see we start building like a little application out of Excel. We talk about like define names. We're gonna learn how to do data validation, protect cells, and then build macros, which is a little more difficult. We'll probably delve a little bit outside the book for that as well. I'm also going to pass this around, so help yourself. If you'd like any Pop-Tarts or Rice Krispie treats or anything, take as many as you like as well. If you want to fill up your backpack, go ahead. So let's go to module 7, module 7 data files, and go to the module, and there's something called winter. Okay, bring up the winter workbook. Okay, we're going to try to build, I guess apparently we are registering youth for, looks like it's soccer, for a soccer league. And we want to build a little input form, and then eventually we want to build a table of all the registration data, like the name of the player, the guardian, the telephone, the grade, shirt size, all those things. And we also want to print, whoever pays for this, a receipt. So this is what we have. But to do that, we're going to start by creating define names. So this little area up here, which we haven't really referred to much, you see where it says A1? That is the name box. So if I click on a cell, if I go to any cell, let's go to F3, you'll see, that cell is called F3. Now, that's all very well and good. However, it is probably better if we want to build an application, we want it to be user-friendly, maybe we're turning this over to some other people. What we can also do is we can provide names for the cell. So let's go to E11, and E11 isn't a great name. So let's click on the name box, highlight E11, and we can type in there activity, and I'm just going to use intercapping, activity fee. Okay. And then hit enter. Then go down to E12 and go to the name box and type Rockport disk. So Rockport discount. So we can name a cell a given name. So now no longer, it is still named E11, but the cell is also activity fee. You see when I click on it, it says activity fee up here. I click down here, it goes to Rockport discount. So we can do a cell at a time. We can also do a range. So highlight D2 the whole way down to F8, and change the box up here and type in youth info and hit enter. And finally, we're going to go down to the 40th row and select A40 through F40. And let's call that the transfer area. I'll make my name box wider. So what's kind of nice is, we're working with a worksheet like this, an application, and there's a lot of things going on. We want to know where the activity fee is, and perhaps I don't know. I can go to this drop down I can click on activity fee, and it'll take me to the cell that I defined as activity fee E11. If I go to report discount, it'll take me that. If I go to youth info, it highlights that range. So these cells now go by various ranges. Now, if you look, we want to do this as well with all of these fields. So from B3 to B12, I want to give them all names. But what's luckily for me is I also have labels associated with those cells next to it, like A3 is kind of a good name for B3, right? And A4 is kind of a nice name for B4. So what I can do is I can highlight that range. So I'm going to highlight A3 through B12. And I'm going to go to the Formulas tab. And there is a defined names. You guys see defined names grouping. And in there, there's a create from selection. You guys see create from selection. So I'm going to define names from a selection. And it says, where are the names at? Well, in this case, the names are in the left column, right? The names for the right column are in the left column. So uncheck top row if it is checked. All you want checked is the left column. I select OK. It doesn't really say anything, but now you'll see if I go to my name box, you'll see city, state, zip is now the name. And what it basically does, you notice there's a space or a comma there. Those aren't valid in the name, so whatever like space or comma encounters, it uses an underscore to name it. So if I go to registration date, it'll take me to registration date. Now, how is this useful to me? Well, there's a couple ways it's useful to me. Obviously, to navigate to things, if I have a lot of information going on, I can go to the name box. But what's really interesting or useful to me is, if I'm building a formula, and let's say, we're going to get rid of this, but let's say I want to take the activity fee minus the Rockport discount. So I could say equal E11 minus E12, and it would give me 75, right? It's taking E11 minus E12. But when I'm building that formula, E11, E12, that's not really a natural way to refer to things. And now that I've given them names, I could also say, well, I'm not even sure what these are on. I could say, hey, take the normal activity fee, and you see I type equal ACT, and then down below you see that little, see the one with it tries to enter the functions first. But you see activity and activity fee has a little tag beside it. That indicates that that's a defined name. So I'm going to go down to activity fee by using my arrow down key, and then I'm going to tab on that. Okay, and if I type more, it would eventually have gotten there. But activity fee minus, and I want to subtract the Rockport discount. So that's a more natural way to write a formula, right? Instead of E11 minus E12, yeah, it's kind of self-defining what this is. This is activity fee minus Rockport discount. Does this make sense? Now, a couple things. When you build something like this, when you're building an application, sometimes you want to know, what are all these defined names, where they live, all those things. Typically, we haven't been paying much attention to this, but a lot of times when you build an application, you'll usually have a worksheet that's kind of like a documentation. Maybe has instructions in it, maybe has the purpose of the spreadsheet. One of the things it also can have in it is go to A8 and type define names, and then go to A9, and if we go to formulas and click on the drop down, it says use in formula, and there's an option that says paste names, and I'm going to paste the whole list. And what that does is basically it just documents it for me. It says activity, the defined name activity is really referring to the receipt worksheet, cell B5. The youth, well, let's make this bigger. The youth info is really a range of D2 to F8. And a lot of times when we build applications like this, and maybe we give them to someone else, this kind of can help us define things. Now, let's go back and let's delete that little formula we put in there. And let's pretend like, we have formulas that exist already that are based on the cell references. So I'm going to put in here equal, once again, E11 minus E12. And I'm going to get the 75. But maybe I have a boatload of formulas in this worksheet, right, that are using cell references. And I'm like, I want to clean them up and use defined names because now I've given them defined names. We can do that by going to define names. And if you see, it says apply names. And I can apply all of them, I guess. I click OK. And what it did there was it went through the worksheet, looked for, hey, E11 actually has a better name. It is actually activity fee, and it substitutes that in for E11, right? So if you have an existing worksheet and you say, well, geez, I'm using this cell a lot, let me give it a name, and you don't want to go find everywhere you use that cell reference, that'll do that for you. Does this make sense? Okay. There's also, like a lot of these tools, when we looked at conditional formatting, there's usually a little manager, it allows us to edit those things. So if we go to the define name section again, and we go to name manager, you'll see this is ways we can create new ones, we can delete ones that exist, all those kinds of things. So that's where, I'm not going to go through that, but that's something we can do, okay? All right. So what it wants us to do is it wants us to build so they're going to enter data in here, whoever this is. I'm going to delete that. And we want to build a little receipt we're going to print here, okay? So it wants us to go to, looks like E20, let's see where we go first. Go to the receipt worksheet and cell B20. Let's go to B27, and all I'm going to do is I want to populate the area up above to this receipt. So I'm going to say equal here, and I'm going to try to find Guardian, okay? And I'm going to hit equal Guardian, so it's going to bring that down. I'm going to say equal here. I'm going to find the defined name address, not the function address, but the defined name address. I'm going to say equal. I'm going to find the defined name city, state, zip. Equal telephone. I think this is where in E25 I'm going to put the registration date. So equal registration date. Registration date. In E27 I'm going to put the youth name. I'm going to put the activity, not the fee, but the activity. I'm going to put the grade, shirt size. I'm going to put the activity fee here. And so kind of a lot easier doing it that way with the defined names than if I had to go up there and say, oh, that's B7, that's B8, right? It was much easier. Now we want to give a discount, the Rockport discount to anyone that has a yes here. So this cell is either going to be 0 or that $5. So how do I want to do that? Yes. Sure. So I'm going to say equal if, and I'm going to say if, I think it was Rockport resident equals double quote YES, then I'm going to put in there the Rockport discount, which is the field up above that's $5. If not, I'm going to put in a 0. So this reads a lot better than if B7 equal yes, then use D8 or whatever it might be. Now we understand kind of the logic of that if statement. If they're a resident, give them the discount. If they're not, don't give them the discount. So there's the $5. Let's change this to no, just to see that my if statement works. Now they don't get a discount. In E36, we want to put our total. So we're going to say equal. I think it wants to give us a defined name here of receipt fee. Let's make that a receipt fee. Let's make this receipt discount. And we'll say equal receipt fee minus receipt discount. Okay, so all that section, that's basically the first section of chapter 7, module 7, is the use of defined names. And really, it can help a great deal, when you're dealing with a big spreadsheet. Okay, and when you want to do that, I think it makes things more intuitive as you write formulas. It makes things easier to debug if there's issues. There's just a lot of benefits to doing that. Now, one of the things that, if anyone had any programming classes, we learned this. Maybe you didn't learn this because I don't teach programming anymore here. But what does that stand for? G-I-G-O. Do you guys know what that means? No? Kind of applies to even life and everything. Garbage in, garbage out, right? So if the input is no good, the output is not going to be no good. Does that make sense? So if I'm giving this form to someone and I have things that are based off things, for example, Rockport resident, if someone types in there maybe or you bet or something like that, it's affirmative, but I'm not going to recognize it as a Rockport resident. I only want yes or no answers in here, right? And when I have registration date, perhaps I don't want someone to put a registration date like in the year 1900, right? Because we're registering youth maybe starting today. There's things like that I want to make sure that no problematic data gets in there. Okay, and the way I can do that in a application such as this is we can do data validation. Okay, so we're trying to protect the data that comes in, because if we do that, then we can ensure the data comes out is much better. So let's go to B3, which is the registration date, and go up to, where is that at? It's in the data tab. Yeah, it's just not expanded. So under the data tab, under data tools, and yours may have data validation written here, mine doesn't, but you see this little area, it says data validation. Click on that, and what we're doing is we're going to assign a rule to that cell, okay? And right now, by default, every cell in Excel says, hey, allow any value. We're not going to allow any value. We're going to say, first off, it has to be a date. So let's change that allow any value to a date. And second off, I'm going to say that date has to be greater than or equal to, let's say greater than or equal to, and I'm going to say today's date. What is today? The 02/17/2017. Okay, so that's the first thing. Okay, if I right now it says ignore blank because I have that checked. If I have a blank in there, it's not going to throw out an error message, right? It says a blank's okay. If I uncheck that, a blank would not be okay. A couple things that go along with this. If I go over to input message, this is a message that will display when the person that you give this application to selects that cell. So let's put in a message here, and let's say we give a title for the message. We'll say date validation. And we'll just say date must be today or later. Now let's do this. I should say this. Please enter a date today or later. Okay. And let's go over to error alert right now, and let's change the style. You see it right now, it's a stop. Let's just change it to information. Okay. And we'll click OK. Now a couple things I want to show you. When I select B3, you see that input message comes up and it kind of guides me. It says, hey, date validation. Please enter a date today or later. Let's validate. I mean, let's put in a bad date. So we have a good date in there right now. Let's put in 01. Oops. Why am I putting a decimal place? 01/01/2017. I hit enter. Okay, and it puts up a message that says the value doesn't match the data validation restrictions defined for this cell. That's a pretty uninformative message, right? It just says something's wrong here, but it doesn't really tell you what's wrong. So what we're going to do is go to that cell again, go to data validation, and let's go over to error alert. And here's where we can put a message, let's say like entry problem, I don't know. We'll say, please enter, the date must be after 02/07/17. And I click OK. Now let's try it again. So I'm going to say 01/01/2017. I hit enter. It says the date must be, so it gives me a better message, it says entry problem. I click, excuse me, I select OK, and it allows it to happen. Okay, the reason it allows it to happen is I control that as well. So let's go back to that cell, let's go to data validation, and we go to error alert. You'll notice there's 3 levels, right? There's 3 levels. There is a stop, there is a warning, and there is an information. The stop doesn't allow it to happen, right? It says you want to retry because you screwed this up. So it'll never, you'll never be able to get anything in there unless it matches that date. The warning gives you an option to kind of like override. The information has a more pleasant chime and just kind of like, hey, here's some, did you really mean to do this? You know what I'm saying? So it's different levels of severity. Let's go to the stop, and you see it's the red X, and let's give that a try. So you notice it still has a bad date in there, but it didn't do anything because it only does data validation once I hit enter on that cell. So if I try it again, enter the same damn date, 01/01/2017, I hit enter. Okay, it says the date must be after, and it makes me retry. Okay, if I cancel it, well, that's because it's already in there, but it's a more severe error. Now the other thing, the date that's currently in there, I added data validation, is violating it. If I go to data validation and I say circle invalid data, you see how it circles that? So let's say I have existing data, I add data validation, and I want to see if there's anything that violates that. That will do it for me, that circle invalid data. I'm going to clear that validation circle. Let's put today's date to 2017. So, we can do a lot of different kind of validation. If we look at the youth name, let's go up to data validation for cell B4. Let's go to settings. And we can say, I don't know, maybe the text length has to be less than or equal to 30 characters. Okay, we can do something like that. So there's all kind of validation rules we can put on this. Now, what's very useful is for things like this where there's a predefined list. So for grade, obviously it looks like what I want to be able to put in there is either G3, G4, G5, or G6. I don't want them to be able to mistype and put in like G9 or G0 or maybe M0, something to that effect. So there's a data validation type that's very useful for that. It's called a list validation type. So let's go to grade, let's go to B6. Let's go to data validation. And let's change it to allow any value. Let's change it to list. And it asks for, all right, what is the list of data that it's acceptable here? I'm going to click the little spreadsheet. And I'm going to say, any of the values you find in E4 to E7 are acceptable. You'll notice I have this checked right here in cell dropdown. If I click OK, you'll see not only does it do data validation, but it gives us a little input that allows me to do a dropdown. So this is beneficial to the user. It saves them some time, it saves them some guesswork, and allows them to do that. Why don't you guys add data validation for the shirt size, because it's going to be very, very similar. So we're going to go to the shirt size, we're going to go to data validation, we're going to go to list, and I'm going to say the source looks like F4 to F8. Okay, so that gives me a drop down. I want to do something similar with B8, but this time I don't have yes or no written anywhere, so I want to put that in. So I'm going to go to data validation. I'm going to go to list, and in the source area, instead of giving it range of cells, I can just give it the text I want to see, yes, comma, no. Okay, so it'll be, it'll show a yes as a potential, and it'll be no as a potential. I click OK, and you'll see now that it has a drop down for yes and no. Okay. So data validation does a couple things, right? The input message allows us to provide a message to the user to help he or her enter in, he or she enter in the proper data. Data validation prevents them, from entering incorrect data. So it can be very, very useful to us. Let's see what else. Okay. So the last thing we're going to talk about here is I am giving this to someone to enter in youth information, right? And they don't know what the hell they're doing with Excel. So they start coming over here and maybe changing things. Maybe they come down here and change this formula where I have an if statement and they don't know what they're doing. So what I want to do is I want to protect certain areas of the worksheet. Actually, in this case, I only want them to be able to access this area right here, okay, the area where they're going to input. So from B3 to B12. How do we do that? Well, every cell in Excel has a property called locked or not, okay? So let's go to B3, B12, and right-click on that, and go to Format Cells, which I know you guys have done that before, or you can go to the Home tab, and in the Font group, you can click the drop-down, and you're in the Format Cells area as well. Okay, so wherever you get there, tab we've used number, we've used alignment, font, border, fill. There's a tab called protection. So you'll notice that it says these cells are locked already, and they are, right? The property lock is on, but I'm able to access them. Well, why? The reason for that is by default all the cells are locked, but the worksheet isn't protected. So what I want to do is I want to unlock just these cells, B3 through B12, by unchecking the lock button. So I'm going to take B3, B12, unlock those cells. I'm going to click OK. You'll still notice I'll be able to access anything, but I can go up here to the Review tab. We haven't used the Review tab much. And under the Review tab, you'll see an option under Changes. You see Protect Sheet. Click on Protect Sheet, and it says Protect Worksheet and Contents of Locked Cells. And I'm going to say Select Locked Cells. I'm going to uncheck that. I don't want them to be able to select locked cells. And I click OK. Now what I want you to notice is if I tab, it just tabs through those unlocked cells. If I try to click over here to access a cell that's locked, it doesn't allow me to do that, right? Because it is now a locked sheet. I unlocked these cells. If I want to unprotect the sheet, I can do so by just clicking Unprotect Sheet. Let's protect the sheet again, but this time let us select locked cells. So I'm going to click OK. I'm going to tab through, okay? But I can also now, you see, select locked cells. I can't edit them, I can't change them because that's a protected cell, but allows me to select them. Okay, so it depends how you want to do that. Let's unprotect the sheet again. And let's go to Protect Sheet. And I could also password protect this sheet. Like you're saying, well, if I turn this over to someone and I lock these cells, well, if they know anything about Excel, they can just go in and click, unprotect, right? And then they're the same boat they're in. Well, I can assign a password to this worksheet. So you can't break this. So if you forget this password in 30 seconds, shame on you. But let's make a password. So I'm going to call mine Miko, M-I-K-O. Let me make sure I type that right, M-I-K-O. And I'm going to click OK. Makes me re-enter it. Okay. So now you see I have this thing protected. I can only access those input cells. If I click on Unprotect Sheet now, it says you can't unprotect sheet until you put the password that is assigned to it. If I type in Miko, okay, it allows me to unprotect the sheet. Okay, so if we're turning over something that we've built like this, an application to someone else, and we're worried about them, and you got to, when you give something to a client or a user, you have to code for like every possibility. Like they always say, like code, pretend like they're in third grade, right? Like they'll stick in, for gender, they'll stick in maybe, right? Like you gotta protect for all those things, that they don't know what they're doing, that they're going to go in and monkey with things. So you try to lock down as much as possible, except the things that make the application useful. We can also, so we can protect a sheet. We can also protect the workbook. Okay, so the workbook, if we protect the structure, that means that they can't add tabs, they can't move tabs. You know what I'm saying? Like we can protect sheets, but we can also protect the workbook and its structure as well. The last thing I want to show you, and then we'll be done. We have a guest in today. He's downstairs. I got to go meet with him, and you guys can use the time as lab. But we can also, and you've probably seen this before, we can also put comments in cells. So if I go to cell B3 under the review tab, I can do a new comment, and it's going to give me the name for this machine, which is workstation, and I'm just going to type in this is a comment, and that's it. And you'll see, I know there's a comment in that cell. Why? Because there's a little red corner to it, and when I click on it, I still get my input message, but I also get, when I click up in the right-hand corner, I get a comment. That's more useful for, excuse me, when you might be, I don't know, working with someone, making comments back and forth about values, on a worksheet. So that kind of covers module 7.1 and 7.2. What we're going to do on Monday is we will start. So save this to your desktop or something like that. I'm going to save it to my desktop anyways. And on Monday, we'll start to create macros. Macros are little bits of code that do something. Okay, so we'll start to create macros. Any questions? All right. I'll be right back if you have questions. I'm going to go